Hi, this is me from the future. I just finished recording this, almost 3 hours video. And I went through a lot of examples from you guys. And I do not expect you to watch this entire thing in one go. Believe me, I couldn't. So, watch how much you want. Grab a coffee, grab a tea. And when you feel like you are completely over my voice, just hit pause and continue tomorrow or something like this. Spoiler, there's no homework. At the end of the session, I talk about what I want you to do for the face-to-face assignment, so you really want to watch everything through. Also, a lot of people had really good examples of things they would like to learn, and I hope I talk about them good enough. So a bunch of techniques I mentioned, some of them we already know, just shown in a different way, and a lot of new techniques I show here as well. So it's definitely worth watching everything through, but I don't expect you to watch it through in one go, so there's no limit like you have to send me the proof of attendance by the end of the day. You don't have to send me any proof of attendance. Just like when you finish it today or tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, just send me a quick email. Tell me what you think about the session, and yeah, just let me know that you watched it, then I can mark you as present. Okay, so that was it. Get ready, and let's jump back to the present. Hello, you guys! For today's session, I want to do it a little bit differently. Well, the session itself is a little bit different, so I decided to film myself, and I've waited until it has gotten a little bit later so that the lights from my things in the back are not too bright, so I hope you can see myself. I will place myself in the corner in a moment. So today I will go through the examples that you've sent me. I've gotten a lot of emails, some things were overlapping, but I feel like I haven't gotten as much as I should. So now I'm thinking that I might have lost some people's feedback or like the inspirations that you send. So if you don't see your questions answered, write me a very angry email and then I will get back to you personally. So sorry about that. If I forgot someone, it was not on purpose, then I might have gotten just too many emails in the same thread or something and then I missed it and forgot to put it separately. So I'm very sorry. Don't take it personal. So I have kind of like categorized it in two things: people that sent me links and people that sent me files directly. I will start with the people that sent me files directly. I will go through the examples, show you kind of my thought process on how to analyze it and how to think about rebuilding it. And for some parts, I will actually start rebuilding it. And then I will go to the links that people have sent. Sounds good? I hope so. You don't need to follow along, so this is not a session where you need to send in a proof of attendance, which does not mean that you can stop watching right now. So keep watching, but there will be no need for proof of attendance. Just send me a little, yes, Leonard, I'm done, I watched it. And then I can mark you as present. So, let me start. This is my After Effects recording from earlier. Let's start with the first examples that I got here. So, one question here was about how to build something like a city, and the other one was about the tube thing. So I think it was this example here. I'm not 100% sure, so I will just go through the examples that we see. Okay, starting with, why did it get smaller? There we go. Starting with the models themselves. I think we already know how to build low poly cars, so that shouldn't be an issue. Then the rest of the houses that we see here are mainly just very simple polygon objects. Let's just go through a couple of the examples. Let's, for instance, I think getting the basic shape like this shouldn't be hard. And then adding kind of like cutouts for the windows also shouldn't be hard. But let's see how we could build, for instance, a rooftop like this, just as a very, very quick example. I would start with, I could start with a cube, but I will actually start with a plane because it's a little bit easier for the beginning. And I will switch my display to garage shading with lines. And I want to start with much less lines here. So let me just reduce the amount of segments that I have altogether. Then I hit C to convert it into polygons. Then what I want is to create this cut that we see here, right? So I could use the knife tool. I could also try to use the bevel tool on this edge. I think I will go for the cut tool. It's not the most accurate one, but it's the easier one for now. So I hit K and K. And then I switch to one of these three modes, doesn't matter which one. And I just create a cut like this. With escape, I sort of apply the changes. Switching to the point mode, I can delete one of the points here and I have my basic shape for the rooftop. And then I can start using this as my base. So I know that I would want to create this entire house like this. So I would take this, select this polygon that I have, and hit D to extrude it up. Then I don't hit D again. I will just switch to the move tool and move this upwards until I have pretty much the height that I want the house to be. Now, for the top part here, I want it to be a little bit thicker, a little bit wider, and extrude it up and create this indentation there. So for that, I would want to take the exact same polygon that I have here and just duplicate it into a new object. And we do that with a function that is called split. I'm not quite sure where exactly it is here, probably somewhere under mesh and add. No. Clone? Oh yeah, there it is, split. But I usually just remember that I want to split part of my geometry out. So I use the console. Shift-C is the shortcut, and I type in split. And it's the first split that we see there. Now what this does is, it creates a copy of my plane. So I still have my original plane, which is this one here, and we can see the copy of the plane is just the part that I had selected, which is perfect. So I select this part, the new plane, select the polygon, and I want to make this a little bit wider. So I will first do an inner extrude, but I will use it to extrude it outwards. So I for the inner extrude, but instead of dragging it inwards, I will drag it outwards. Now I do get some weird things like that where it starts to flicker. And the reason is because I have overlapping geometry. So when I turn this layer off, it should look fine. If it doesn't look fine, then I'm not happy. Then I realize that the extrude outwards was not the right way to go. So this should work fine. And here, I've been working with Blender too much today because they works differently. Okay, so to extrude it outwards, let's see. I think I would instead use the edge tool. Let's see if we can extrude it from here. If we have the edges and use extrude, no, then it just goes up. Then the last option that I would do is to just make this a little bit larger, is use the scale tool, hold on the control key, and click and drag and scale this out. It's not exactly the way that I would prefer it because it's not proportional, but I think for this example it should work just fine. When we turn on the plane again, so alt clicking on this, we can see that we might still have some weird overlaps. So when I select this, it still feels like it flickers. No, it doesn't show the flicker, but we still have overlapping geometry, but we don't really care because we don't see that part. All right, so with this part selected, we hit Command A to select everything, D for the extrude, and then we extrude it outwards to give this some thickness. Then I want it to be a little bit thinner at the top even. So I select this top polygon, do an inner extrude, and then a regular extrude, D, and push it downwards so that I have the top part here. There we go. Then it's a similar process to do stuff like the chimneys. For the windows, I think what I would do is I would first create the one object that has kind of like the size of the windows that I want. So something like this should work. Then I will use the cloner. I drop them into the cloner, which will override their position. I make sure that I use the grid array, and I want it to be 3 by 3. Well, that's easy. So 3 by 3 by 1. Then I have a nice grid array that I can adjust to this. Okay, maybe I'll make my cube a little bit higher. Because my cube is parented to the cloner, but the cloner tells the cube where it should be, the original cube is now in a weird spot. What I usually do is, if I do stuff like this, I just reset the position of the cube again, and in this scenario, it aligns with the center window perfectly. So I can kind of adjust things like this. Now, I can use this as a subtractor. So I can go to the bool, go to the body, so let's call this one body and rooftop. And we put the rooftop into the bool and the cloner as the second element. And we tell the bool to subtract. Now the cloner doesn't create geometry in a way that the bool understands it. So the cloner first needs to be merged into an actual object. And we do that by using the connect. So with the cloner selected, we go to the connect, hold down the Alt key and release. So this way we are creating a connect object right where the cloner is. And in theory, this should now work. Oh, if I wouldn't have put in the rooftop. Of course, it should have been the body. And not the boy. The body. There we go. I would have also worked without the thing here. Oh, that's nice. So the connect is usually something that I try if something doesn't work out, but apparently it would have already worked out well. So I can now create the holes that I want, and next I would create the inside parts of the windows. And what I like to do is use the cube that I now have as a reference. So I could copy this, go to a new scene, paste this in here, reset this, and then I can say like, okay, so this is my reference. Maybe I switch the mode here to X-ray so I can see through it. Create another cube without X-ray. This will be the glass part. Then I want this to have a little bit of a border around it. What could I do? There's so many things I could do. I think I will just do it in the manual modeling way, just so that we get used to working with modeling a little bit more. So I could duplicate this. So this would be the glass, and this would be the border. And I think I will just I think I will just create a duplicate of this. Or actually I already created the duplicate. So I have this. I only want to keep this face here. Everything else should be deleted. So I had U and I to invert the selection, and I just delete it. So now I'm left with just one polygon, which I can now extrude to the inside and delete it and make the entire object just a little bit larger. Like this. And then I select all of the polygons that are left here and I duplicate them, or not duplicate them, but extrude them with D. And this time I do want to create caps. It's not that necessary, but this way I have a backside. So here you can see the polygons are closed. Without the caps, oh, damn it. So if I extrude this out without the caps, you can see how it's a hole here. But if I turn the caps on, then I get a nice closed geometry. Since this will be on the inside of the window, it's not really that necessary. But anyways. Now, if I want to change the thickness of this, I can fairly easily just select the inside here by hitting U and L for the loop selection, hover over the edge here, then I have the polygon selected on the inside, and I can use T for the scale tool and adjust how thick I want these parts to be. Then for the line in the middle, I mean, we can just use another cube, place it where we want it to be. I would make it editable because it's a little bit easier to scale it to the size that I want. So here I would make sure that my front-facing polygons are exactly where I want them to be. So these ones are supposed to be right here. These ones don't really matter. And here I can adjust the thickness and how wide I want it to be. Like this. All right. This should work just fine. So now I have my window. I would just put it into a null object. So it's considered one element. Then I would copy this, switch over to my other scene, take the cloner that I have, copy it out, paste my window, drop it into the cloner, delete the reference cube, and then I can place the window into its spot, like this. And I often, when I model something like this, I like to turn on the SSAO, just because it lets me see where geometry is a little bit better. So even when I don't show my shading and my edges. All right. So when building a city like this, it's usually starting with one house and just playing around with things. And then you build another house and you play around with alternatives of that. And you can see how everything is just in the end made up of something that usually could start with a cube. Here, for instance, these are two different geometries for the top of the houses, for the rooftops. And it's essentially just a cube that gets thinner at the top. So if we start with a cube, you could always just scale this down, and then we have a rooftop like this. If you move it down too flat, then it starts to try to blend these things together, even though it shouldn't. In that case, simply go to the Phong tag and tell it to... I'll just get rid of the Phong tag altogether. You could either try to not limit the angle, but then it might get worse. You could also try to decrease the angle all the way down to 0. Then it should definitely work. Or you can just delete the Phong tag altogether, and then you will have no polygon blendings, and you get a nice sharp geometry there. For the other parts, I think it's also just mainly cubes. This pattern here of this part of the street, it looks to me as if it's really simply just, well, cubes with a cloner. So a cube, I move it later. A cube, a lot smaller, a lot flatter, something like this, placed into the cloner, and in the cloner we could tell it to be linear, a couple of more of them, not moving along the y-axis, but moving along the x-axis. Like this. And then we have our pavement on the side. So, as you can see, building, especially low poly cities like that, is fairly simple. And the light setup is also stuff that we already know. It's simply a sky with a gray color on top and with an infinite light with a very, very low infinite angle so that the shadow stays sharp. Okay, I will not take this much time for every example because a lot of the techniques are repeating themselves. So here pretty much the same thing. For this year, I will just go through specific parts where I feel like, oh, there might be something different to talk about. Here, for instance, we could try... I'm not sure, is this flat or is this rounded? Let's pretend that this is flat. Let's see how we could arrange this. I think for the basic shape, I would go to to a rectangle, and I lay it flat on the floor. That was not flat. Here we go. Oh, it's raining. I hope the raining doesn't distract in the recording. And something like this, and I increase the rounding to the max. So I essentially have kind of like a capsule shape, but in 2D. Then I can create a cube. I'm not quite sure which axis I want to change, so I'll not do it just yet. Then we use a cloner, drop it into the clone, and I will tell the cloner to clone across an object, which will be the rectangle. Then I realize that it's not distributing it in an even way, and that is because the shape that it's creating uses intermediate points, so the rectangle shape uses intermediate points. Instead, what we know, if we want to create an even distribution of points, remember we talked about it in the class where we talked about these ones here, the lathe, the loft, and the sweep. We want to change the intermediate points to uniform. Now the cloner often needs a little bit of a push, so let's turn it off and on again, and now we can see how we have an even distribution. Now with the cube selected, I will just play around. Okay, so this is apparently that, and this is this. Okay, and then I will just play around with how many of them I need. So in the clone, I can see how right now the count is 10, and I can just decrease or increase this count however I like, and I feel like a count of 16 seems to do a quite nice and even job and in applying it to my shape. So I would now go ahead and make this a little bit flatter. Another solution would be, if I want this to be also bent around, we could try to, well, let's remember that this is kind of working. So let's do it with, still with a cube and the cloner, and we have 16 clones, but this time we will do it in a linear fashion that we duplicate them. So 16, and we will do it, oops, the other way around, sideways like this, with a little bit of a distance there. And we will then use this cloner, we have to put it into a null object to apply a deformer. And the deformer is the spline wrap. This is one of the most amazing deformers that I've ever worked with in Cinema 4D. Now, you usually apply it by simply applying it to an object. Let me just give you a very quick example. So let's say I have, let me just create another shape. So let's say I have this shape. And let's say I have this geometry. I could place the spline wrap into the figure. I would tell it to not detect it sideways, but going down to up, so plus Y. And the spline that it should use is this one. And now, as you can see, it stretches the object along the spline. So it's kind of like creating a stroke with this. And with the offset, we could also have this move along the spline. So this is something I use all the time. I oftentimes realize, well, this is kind of like the shape, I get what this is, but it's really hard to create something in that specific arrangement. But I can see that it's much easier to create it in a flat way and then use the flat version and wrap it around what I want it to be. Make sense? So the same thing is what I'm trying to do here. So I think of this in a flat version, what it would look like if it's unwrapped, and then I will wrap it around my geometry. So because the cloner, if I drop this into the cloner, then it gets irritated because the cloner thinks that this is a child, and then we have a cube, then the spline wrap, a cube, a spline wrap, and that's weird. So we need to create a null object and have the spline in here, so the spline detects the cloner as the element that it should go to. Right now, apparently it tries to point to the X direction, so we want it to go in the Z direction. So Z plus or minus doesn't matter. And as the spline, we use the rectangle. There we go. And this seems to be working a whole lot better. We might have an issue here where it is too close. So there, we might just use a couple of % to reduce it here. And another cool thing about this is we can even play around with the offset. So here we could have this move around in a circle. And if we want these ones to be rounded, we just need to go to our cube and make sure that it has enough segments going around. So here we need more segments along the z-axis. And then it can be wrapped around in a really smooth way. So, as I said, you can first think of the shape, what it looks like unwrapped, and with a spline wrap, you can then use a spline to wrap it into the shape that you want it to be. The same goes for the railing, that we have here. Let me also talk about, in a very quick way, how we could do this one. So I would start again with just a plane, get rid of the segments, hit C to convert it. Then I can just start by extruding things. So here I just move it to the side. Then I know that I want something to go to that side, so I extrude it, holding down the Control key. Then I can select this one, extrude it. I'll just do it very roughly. Then this goes here, then it should go down. Yeah, kind of like this. Yeah. Then I want to extrude it flat again. However, it detects the angle. I'm tilting my head. It detects the angle here of the polygon, but I still wanted to extrude in a flat way. So I use this tool here to tell it to constrain to an axis, and then I extrude it outwards based on the world axis. So this works a lot better. Okay, one more time. This goes to the side, and this goes here, down, and then to the front. So something like this. Okay. Now, what I want is a spline that moves along this edge, but it is a little bit more indented. So I will hit KL to create a path this way. So I will do it kind of like by hand a little bit. So I want it to be here, 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 and here. It's really hard to see with these colors. And then I will start to select these by myself. So wherever I want the railing to move across, I will, oh, not that one. I will select the edges that I want. Okay, like this. I would then, of course, do the same with the other side as well, but I'm too lazy right now. So I've created this selection of polygons, and I can split these polygons into a spline. Aha! So, I forgot where this option is. Is it on a right click? Edge to spline. Oh my god, it is. That was a lucky guess. So, edge to spline, which now created a spline which has this exact path. Awesome! So now I could create this railing, and I can try to use, again, either the regular cloner, or I would use the spline wrap. And I think I will go with the spline wrap again. So for the railing, I would first create a single rail, which is essentially something like this, I guess. Let me do it as a polygon object. So I convert this into a polygon object, then I know I want this to be a little bit indented here on the other side as well. So I select both sides here, then I indent it a little bit, then I know I don't need these three polygons here. I also don't need these ones. And all of them down there need to be at the bottom. So I select my points here and here, and I make them go to 0 and 0. Then I need the polygons to be closed. So I had ME for the poly pen, because here we have a really nice function where I can hover over an edge, hold down Command, click and drag, and have it snap over to another edge in order to close this here. Right. This looks pretty fine to me. And I also know that probably the inside here needs to be a little bit thinner, because when both edges are attaching to one another, they shouldn't look twice as thick. So now I have my one rail, which I then place into the cloner. And again, I make it linear. I have no idea how many clones I need yet. I will figure that out in a moment. So for now, I just need to figure out how far apart they need to be, something like this. They can overlap because we will not see it in the end anyways. All right, so we take the cloner, copy it, switch over to our project, paste it in. Then we know we need to have this in another null object. Then we use the spline wrap, drop it in here, and let's do this one along the x-axis. Oh, that's already correct, perfect. And we use this spline here. Now by default, it, well, stretches the entire object, which doesn't work. So we need more objects in here, so we just increase the amount of clones. Ta-da! Now by default, they might not look in the direction that we want to, and it might be a complete mess. And that is why we need to create, do we have an up vector in here? Here, we can play around with the up vector and try, not this one. There we go. So just play around with the up vectors until you, well, see a good end result. And now we can see how we have this railing applied on here, and it works pretty well. We can also use, I don't think that we can offset it like this, but what we could do is we could drop a null in here, and then inside of the null we can take the cube and just move it up a little bit, and thereby moving it up like so. So it sits nicely on the floor. Then on the cloner we could use the size, select all of them, hold down Control, and drag it down until it has the height that we want it to have. And of course, with the amount of clones, we can then define how many of them we want. Okay, and then we have this nice railing here on the side. Good. The other things, again, are just cubes and things that I already talked about, I think. All right. The next one was this one. Here, I would think that someone just got a free iPhone model from the web. This is just an image texture applied to it. Spheres. This here is also just kind of, could be manual modeling, could also be a spline. Could be both. I will quickly show this in a moment. This should be clear, should be clear. Here, I would not do the thing that I showed earlier. I would just literally do it by hand. Kind of like create two cylinders here and here, create one spline that has this shape, and then use a circle with a sweep to create this shape here. This one here, again, a cloner, and this part here could be done either with a bend or with a sweep. There are different ways that this could be done. But I think it should also be fairly clear. This one here is also another example of where we could use the spline wrap. So you could think about what this chair would look like when it's flat and just create the outline, extrude it, and then use it with the spline wrap. Let me actually show you how that would work, because when we use an extrude with the spline wrap, there's something that we need to consider. So let's see. I would use, one second. So I would start, I would say from the top view, because that makes the most sense. I will of course use the B-spline, and I will create this basic shape that it would have. So this would be the top, I think. Then it's kind of like straight down here, goes in the middle a little bit thinner. Then we have our seating area nicely rounded, and then it should go back to the center, something like this. Let me align these couple of points here. So this already aligned perfectly. Sweet. Oh, no, they're not. I'm stupid. Z-axis. Oh no, it was aligned perfectly. Here, align it, and these dots here need to be perfectly aligned. 0, 0. Then I can drop this into a symmetry. Symmetry. There we go. Oh, this is way too fat. Doesn't matter. I'm too fat too. Then we drop the symmetry into the extrude. And if it doesn't work, then we might need to try to put this into a connect. And it's still not extruding. Seriously? Are you this stupid? Really? I'm disappointed, cinema. So we take the symmetry and we make it editable. And we might realize that in the symmetry, yeah, it created a path that is not joining on the two sides. So the extrude just sees two separate paths that it can't really extrude. We can see this because a path always has a beginning and an end, and it starts white and it ends blue, or the other way around. One or the two. And we can see that we have a start here and an end here, but also an end here and a start there. So if I take this and I move this to the side, we can see how we get a hole. And that's something that we don't want. So the trick is to decide where we want the beginning to be. So let's select these 2 points. Let's select these 2 points. Right click on them and say join segments. And now you can see, haha, we start at white, go all the way around, and we end in blue. Then we just need to tell the spline that it should be closed. Seriously? What the heck? Cinema is fucking with me right now. Oh, it's just this weird bug where it doesn't show the end properly. Remember, we had this in one of our classes. Was it with you guys? I think. Anyways, but when I go to the model mode, it looks okay again. Now when I drop this into the extrude, now it does what I want. Perfect. Finally. Took you long enough. I will tell it to go in the Y direction, so it goes upwards automatically. That way I just have a little bit more control. Now I could say, okay, so I got this. Then I will go to my side view here, so the right view, and I can create the basic shape that I want. So it probably is pretty straight here, then goes down, then we have this thing, and that's pretty much, maybe it also goes a little bit down like this. Then I could take the spline wrap and drop it into the extrude, make sure that it's the second element, tell it to look, I don't know, plus C or negative C, I think negative C in this case, and use the spline here. But then weird shit is happening. First of all, the rotation is wrong, which is not too big of an issue. I would first try to fix it with the up vector again, and this is fixed. But the geometry that it's creating here just looks hilariously awful. The reason is that it doesn't create polygons here. So we have points on our edges here that can follow along with the geometry, with the spline wrap, but the connections between the two sides just don't have any resolution that we could use. So the trick here is to first go into our spline, and as always, telling it that it's linear? Oh, because of the merging. Well, it doesn't matter. We will tell it to not be adaptive, but uniform. Then already we have a much higher, better resolution here. This looks more awful than before. But on the extrude, we then go to the caps, and under caps type, we tell it to not be n-gon, but we tell it to be delone. And then we have, well, not the most pretty mesh, but a mesh that has a resolution everywhere where we need it. On top of that, we could also say that we want to have a little bit of a bevel, so maybe of 2 or something, to have some nice rounding around the edges. And now we have our nice shape here, and we can interactively change what this should look like by going to the spline, selecting the points, and moving them around, as we please. Okay, good. Now, oh, that's me, hi. So the last example was then this one here, and I think the techniques that I've shown should pretty much explain how this works. So here we just have cylinders, torus, another cylinder. Here I would definitely work with a cutout, so with a boule. This shape here, again, think about how you would do it in a flat version. So in the flat version, you could also already punch in the hole, or you can do it later on. Alternatively, this could also be done with a sweep. To get the rounding here, what you could do is we would need to use I would use a regular Bezier for this, because here we have a rounded corner option. So we could create a shape that is something like this. We could even snap this to the grid. So we could say that we enable snapping. So let's undock this window, enable snapping, and snap to the work plane. Because now I can have this snap. I just wanted to snap to planes, to the points here. So I could go and create something like this, so everything is nicely and perfectly aligned. Whatever, I know this is not exactly the shape. Then we can disable the snapping again. Then we select all of the points that should be affected, and there is a tool that is called chamfer. Or was it round? No, it's chamfer. Chamfer, and then we click and drag. Oh, but we have to do it in one step, so this is apparently very large. So I do it in one step here, and then I continue it over here until it gives me the rounding that I want. Like this, and then I have the basic shape that I want, and then I can use it together with a rectangle and with a sweep. Drop both inside, make this smaller, figure out which side, like this. And we can use the rounding here to give it a little bit of a rounding on the edges. Perfect. Good. I think the rest should make sense then too. Here was definitely a little bit of a color correction done, and we have very, very large and soft lights for this, but also light setup that we already know how we could recreate it. And the material is just with a reflection, as we can see, a Fresnel reflection, as we can see here, and a very, very strong blurriness. Not very, very strong, but I would guess something like 20% probably to achieve this look. Okay, let's go to the next person. So here was someone that wanted to talk about architecture and interior design. And this one here, I believe, is one of the example scenes that you can get directly from within Cinema 4D. And this one here probably too, although I have not seen this personally yet. But, oops, this one here I've definitely seen in the content browser. Speaking of, something that you should download if you have the space on your computer is the content library. You find it by going to Help and then go to Check for Updates. In this window, definitely, if there are updates, install the updates. And in that window, you will also find different download packages for the content browser. The different packages contain different contents, and there are a lot of goodies. So in some of them, we have, for instance, a bunch of materials that we can use. Although the materials, for my taste, are often too... They look a little bit old, like these days we build stuff a little bit more realistically than we see in the materials. Oh, I have my VPN now. Wait, I'll be back in a second. Okay. So these are the different things. Here is one that contains a bunch of materials. So there you will find materials for wood, for fabrics, for all kinds of metals with structures and stuff. Really cool things. Then they have volumes for objects. I think the first volume is the better one. Or was it the second one? I don't remember. They both have a bunch of cool things like cars, tables, appliances, humans, all sorts of things. So a bunch of cool stuff. Then presets, I don't even remember what was in there. I don't think there are too interesting things. They are more for setups. Although in the objects you also find editable or controllable packages. So for instance, milk cartons or wine bottles and wine glasses. And everything is already prepared so that you can place your own textures on it. But many of them are also pre-textured, which is pretty awesome. And then we have the scenes, and the scenes are just scenes that capable people build with Cinema 4D, so you can take a look at how they build the scene and what they use to light it up and what the render settings are. So these are also pretty cool, especially for a beginner. And looking at the examples here, so this one I know is one of the scenes in there, and the other one, I'm not 100% sure, but looking at how this structure looks like, so here it's the same top area. I also think that this is a preset scene in Cinema 4D, so you can actually get the scene file, and it will be in one of these two volumes, and take a look at it. So let me actually download this while I talk. I hope my internet will manage this. And actually I will not use these, because they are not that important for now. Let's first do these ones. And then continue, download, and I can now just have this download and install in the background. At the end, it will ask me to restart Cinema 4D. There I will just do the finishing touches. And yeah, I can definitely also download the second package. And I will tell you a little bit about the cool things that you can find in the content library. So when it comes to this one here, when building stuff like this, the models are fairly simple, and there's actually in the content browser a preset to create a staircase like this, which is pretty cool. This one here is probably something that no one has modeled, but has gotten from somewhere else, because you cannot create stuff like this in Cinema. Not even with the soft bodies. You will not create these wrinkles and such. So it feels like someone else has built this, simulated it either with Blender or Houdini or Maya, and exported it as a model, and then someone downloaded it and used it. So this is also, especially when creating scenes, something that people often do: find models and just texture them themselves, make them their own, and throw that shit together. For the light that we see, I would believe that they've actually used a physical sky. And let me very quickly talk about a physical sky here. Let me do a new scene here. And let's say we have a floor, and let's take this cube. Let's get rid of this and make this a little bit longer. So now let's pretend that this is our room with a huge glass wall, and let's close this up again. And do the window with the inner extrude. Like this. Okay. I will not create the pattern in there. This should be enough. But I will create a bed just so that I have something that I can use to rotate around. So let's pretend that this is the super awesome bed that we have on the inside here. All right. Then we could create a physical sky. Now the nice thing about the physical sky is, let me turn on the shadows. It is creating, well, a physical sky with the nice gradation that we know that a sky usually has, and with the sun. And the sun actually creates a hard shadow for us, just like the regular sun would. Now in this shadow preview here, it doesn't look like it, but when I hit render, it does create it. And you can see how we have this really nice effect of having this bluish tint because the sky is blue in the shadows, and this orangey tint because the sun is, well, orange. In the sky, we have a bunch of cool settings, like we can go to the time and location and we can imitate what the position of the sun is, depending on where on the world at what time we are. So here I could, for instance, go to the city, and let's go to, I'm ducking down because my microphone sits here and I can't see stuff. So Europe, and Germany, and Hamburg, and now. Yeah, now you can see it's pretty light. And apparently the sun is already gone. I can confirm that. And when we move around, we can see that, oh, the sun is almost gone. It's pretty dark. And we can see the stars in the background. So when we now hit render, we can see it's a very, very faint light from the sun here from the sides. So let's just turn back time by just clicking and dragging this down. Oh, it's almost done. Okay, it's done. I will do this in a moment to a nicer point in time. So maybe something like this. I do want the sun to be pretty low. Then I can rotate the entire world because the world revolves around me. And yeah, now I have the sun shining in like this. Now, as we look inside here, we then also realize that this... oh, I moved to a completely different place. That the back part here... No! Give it to me! Why are you not rotating around the object the way I want to? I feel like in earlier versions this was working so much better. You can see that in the back sides here, it's not working too well because we only have a sunlight that hits this part, but there's no light coming in from the back. So when creating an interior scene, it's very important to either add additional lights that light up the inside or allow more areas where light can come in. So in the scene that we see here, there's definitely light coming in from the top. So these windows are apparently a lot higher than my scene here pretends to be. And they might also have additional lights that they set here. So here we can see how definitely additional light hits these areas there. And it's not something that is directly from these windows because they only go up to this part. So here, maybe what I would try is, maybe I would try adding additional cuts. Oh, what's wrong with my navigation? See, it's not sticking to where it should. Additional cuts in the top, and I think I will just do it kind of like in a lame way. Let me do a KL and just say maybe here's a window and here's some windows. Maybe like this. And I just get rid of these. Just so that I have more light that can come in from the top. It will probably not be something that I see directly here, but when I'm inside here, there's just... Ah! My God, cinema, stop annoying me. But we can definitely see how this has now gotten quite a little bit brighter. Another thing that definitely helps with the brightness inside of a room is adding more bounces for our GI. So right now our GI only bounces once. And let me just do a quick comparison here. Let's render this a little bit smaller. Oh. That is what I wanted to, it doesn't matter. Let's render this a little bit smaller, just with the regular GI. Let's also try what it looks like without GI, just so that you can see how the progression is also when it comes to render time. So I render this, and this is without GI, and we can see the sky already adds a little bit of a bluish tint in here, which is nice. A normal light setup would not do this, but it renders very, very quickly. With GI, it will render quite a bit slower, but we can see how this looks a lot more realistic than this. So this looks like, oh, sorry, this is the Cinema 4D Advanced course. This looks like a computer game. This looks already a lot more proper, but of course we can also see how this only takes 2 seconds, and this one already takes more than 20 seconds, probably even longer. So I will let this finish in the background, and let's see what happens if we add one more level. And that is the secondary method, because right now our light only bounces once. So it hits the object, and then it bounces back from the object. And that is the GI, so light hitting something and reflecting from it. But in theory, it reflects a bunch of more times. But each bounce takes a lot more time to calculate, and it's just a very small difference in the render quality. But it is a difference that we can see. So the secondary method takes care of it. There are two main ones. One is, again, the quasi-Monte Carlo, and the other one is the irradiance cache. The other ones are crap. Now, the quasi-Monte Carlo renders the same way, so just as fast, or just as immediate as our primary method, whereas the irradiance cache needs to pre-calculate what it does, and then it will be rendered into the image. So just so that you can see what the difference is, I will use the irradiance cache now, but you could also use the quasi-Monte Carlo. And in some cases, one renders faster than the other. I have not found out what kind of like the rule of thumb is, so if I desperately need the secondary method, I usually try out both and see which works better in which scenario. In general, however, you can say that this one gives you a better quality than this one. But this one sometimes can render faster. Not always, though. So let's see how far along my render is. Picture viewer. And it is done, 1.5 minutes. But it also looks a lot better. Now let's see how long it takes with the irradiance cache. So here it does the pre-pass, then it does its actual render, and we can already see how it overall seems to be a little bit brighter. But as I said, it's just a little bit. So here, this is the before and this is the after. You can, however, see how the shadows are looking smoother and more realistic. So before you were like, this is cheap and this looks so much better. But now, when we look at it, here, the shadows look very dark and they cut off too quickly. And when we compare it with this one, it looks brighter, smoother, and more realistic, the way that light would bounce. The more bounces we add, the more realistic our end result would be. So you can go to the diffuse depth and add more depths here. But by adding more, the more you add, the more subtle the distance between the distance between 2 and 3 is more than the distance between 3 and 4, and so on. So it does, however, take quite a lot more time to calculate. Let's see what the render difference here will be. I mean, we can already see it's not done with the render, and we've already reached kind of like the same time that this took. But you can see how this looks smoother and softer. And when we then add some more color correction or something, it definitely lightens stuff up even more. Alternatively, we can of course also add some light sources in there just to fill stuff up, to pretend that there's a little bit more light in the scene. And we could do that by using an area light. Oh, fucker. They really need to fix their navigation. Making sure that it lights downwards like this. And I make it definitely a lot smaller. When imitating the real world, we always, of course, use area shadows, but we always make sure that the fall-off is set to inverse square physically accurate. Then I place it here. Maybe I'll create multiple lights. Maybe I'll put them in between. So here where I don't have the holes, I will put one light here and one light up here. And then make the fall off a little bit smaller. Something like this. Then I can go back inside here. And I want this to be fairly subtle. I don't want this to be too strong in comparison to the light that the sun gives me. So let me do a quick render here. Oh, and let me also turn off the irradiance cache because it takes too long. Do a render. And now I can see how it lights up my room quite a lot more. Okay, and that is how we would light up a scene like this. When it comes to the materials, they are also very simple. So this one is just a wood texture. You can just take any wood that you find on the internet. The carpet here, I don't know, it could be geometry, but that would be an overkill. It could also be displacement. I don't really see a material like that down here. It could be this one. But maybe we can take a look later at the actual scene and kind of learn from it. And this one here, yeah, this one is actually very cheap if you ask me. So we do have a couple of trees also from the content library that they placed. This back part here, I'm not even sure if this will be actual geometry because I don't see any other trees here. So I'm inclined to believe that this might be an HDRI. But I'm not sure. We can take a look at the scene then. But if I were to rebuild this, I would definitely I would have this as an actual photograph or something and build the trees and build the house, of course, myself, because that is what the main focus is for this. Yeah. And this one here also looks like a very bad texture. I don't really like this, if I'm honest. So we will take a look at the Cinema 4D examples later. Let's compare how the render goes. Render went. Yeah, 2.5 minutes, and you can see it's a very, very subtle effect. So before and after. But it definitely lights up the shadows, and it just gives this extra realness to how the light behaves. So if you want to go for something that looks photorealistic or has this super smooth look, this is the way to go, but it also increases your render time considerably. So always keep that in mind. Okay, let's now quickly restart Cinema 4D and install these updates. That one's done. And I'll be back in a second. And we're back. So where do we now find the things that we've downloaded? You find them under the content browser here, but I don't like this window, it's too small. So let's go to Window and to Content Browser. And then it opens up separately. Here you can then open up the presets, and now we can see we have materials, default presets, but there's not really much stuff in there. And we have our 3D objects volume 1 and 2. So looking into the materials, you can see how they have subcategories, like 2D elements, but we also have something like asphalt. What I like to do is I usually increase the preview size here so I can really see what these materials look like, and when clicking on it you get an even larger preview in the bottom left corner there. We also have brick walls, and didn't they have like a view where it was like no. At some point they split, it doesn't matter. But we can see how we have different kinds of brick walls. We have concrete, and we probably also have this concrete wall that we saw in the render somewhere in here. It could be something like this. Oh yeah, see? Here it is. That's me again. Hello. Here, when you look at this wall with the things on top, here it is. I'm so good at remembering things. Yeah, so if we wanted to use this now on our own wall, we would create, here we can see it's bigger patches of things. So I would start with a cube. I would just drag this into my project and I would apply it to my wall here. Yeah, you can also see here 1, 2, 3 of the dots. 1, 2, oh, even more. Then they scaled it probably a little bit. And then I adjust this kind of like to a size that is appropriate. And then they tiled this on top. So we can either tile this separately. So we can go down here and say that we want more tiles on one or the other axis. But because they had like these bigger patches, I think that that was done with a cloner, and drop this into the cloner. Then let's do 3 and 3 and 1 and apparently just a little bit more apart from one another, like this. And then we have these bigger wall patches. All right. Some other things that we have in the content browser. So a bunch of materials that we can use for our means. Also, as you can see, a lot of different fabrics. Maybe we can even find the carpet. Or maybe not. Maybe it's also something else that they used. Ice and snow, ground, different glass materials. So a bunch of nice things that you can start with. However, they often are trying a little bit too hard and they take forever to render. So you might want to go into the materials and see if you can turn on or turn off one or the other thing in order to get a faster render time. And all kinds of different wooden textures, which is pretty cool. All right, then for the 3D object volumes, they have so many good things like appliances, architectural elements, and there we can see, ta-da, here we have the staircase, which is pretty cool. We have presets for windows, and the cool thing is that oftentimes when it says modular behind it, that you can do a bunch of things with it. So let's drag this into our object panel, and it will be added in here. And a staircase like this usually has different controls. So let me just hide the cloner here. And we just need to find where they are. So it's not on here, not on here, probably there. There we go. We have user data. And here you can see that we can define how high the steps are, what the angle is that it should go around, and a bunch of steps like what is the radius, the step subdivision, that's something that we don't see right here. Then we have the step count. So this is all pretty cool and procedural, and all something that you could have also built yourself if you knew how Espresso works. So all the connections here are done like this, where we have these main controls here, and these controls are then connected in different ways to all these objects that we have here. Looks complicated, and it is. So let's not talk about these anymore. And I will really encourage you to download these things and use these ads because they are all for free to use. So that is pretty cool. Maybe even here we can find the exact bed. No, but at least we can find some pillows that are prepared and at least some beddings. Not the exact bedding that we had. We also have a couple of building presets, but they are kind of like a mixture of, they are not really low poly, but also not high poly, and they are not textured. They're usually for if you build some architectural things and you just need something to fill in the background. But also some things have a little bit more detail, which is kind of cool. And miscellaneous. Yeah, whatever these are for. Okay, so a bunch of cool things in there. Download it, take a look at it, and just because I can, I will also now download the other packages in the background. Check for updates, and go on and download these, and also the presets, just so that I can see what is in there. Okay, so these were those. Let's go to the next one. Here, I think, could also be fairly clear. It's just a bunch of manual modeling to get these details on there. And for the render of this, they use depth of field. I think we have not talked about depth of field yet. So let me just very quickly do just something. So let's say we have this. Oh, this looks like a Rubik's Cube. Anyway, let's go to a camera and look through it. Not look through it. Let's look outside of the camera. Oops, now I'm in it. A camera always has a point that it focuses on. So, for instance, right here. And this will be the part that is in focus when we render something. So let's just add a floor, and let's add a physical sky just because we can. And let's see, where does the shadow cast? Back there. Oh, that's fine, I guess. I can see a little bit. That's good. Now, in order to see the depth of field, I need to go into my render settings, to physical, and enable depth of field. Now, however, when I render something, I might not see the effect just yet, because this is a very, very large object. I mean, this is 2 meters high, so this is larger than most people are. So we have 3 to 4 people stacked on top of each other here. That is a lot. So in the camera, when we go to the physical tab, our f-stop is set to 8, which is pretty large for a scene like this if we want to see depth of field. So because oftentimes in cinema we build things that are larger than reality, we need to use for the f-stop values that are smaller than reality. So I would go to a value of 1 straight away. And when I now render this, even now I can hardly see that there's any depth of field happening. I feel like I can feel it. Yeah, I can feel it in the back end there, but not that much. So I will go to something super unrealistic like 0.1. But I will now start to see how it blurs towards the back there. And I can go even more crazy. Let's try 0.5. And now we start to really see the depth of field happening. There we go. And that's pretty much already it. Depth of field, done. And yeah, the geometry that we see here is just kind of like preparing it. Usually people start with drawing out something, but it oftentimes doesn't end up the way that you draw it. You build something, and while you build it, you get a new idea of how to do something, and then you do something different. Yeah, but this is just creating a bunch of objects by hand. Okay, let's go to the second example here, characters. So characters is something that a lot of people have requested, and there is not like one technique where I can say like, so this is character building. Although most of the time it's really just, yeah, modeling it by hand and creating every polygon. So if you're interested in character design, I recommend that you are, let me just actually do this in the background. I recommend that you watch some tutorials for it, or what I also feel like is very helpful is just looking at speed modelings. I love speed modelings. You probably already know speed paintings, and speed modelings are kind of like the equivalent, where people filmed their screen and then, so let's look for speed modeling. Filmed themselves. Now I actually want to go to YouTube. Where they film themselves how they build something. And sometimes they also tell you how much time it took them to do. So the video in the end might just be 20 minutes or 5 minutes, but they also speed it up by 2 times, 4 times, 10 times the speed. And when you then calculate, okay, so 20 minutes and then it's 10 times the speed, then it's already 200 minutes. So 200 divided by 60 means it's already 3 hours. And I've already seen, like, when you look at things, once I saw something where someone did like a complete character, like from start to finish, and it was like sped up to 10 times the speed, and it was 3 or 4 videos, each 20 seconds long. So it's really crazy. But when we also look for Cinema 4D, then at least we are in an environment that we are used to. And when I was doing this earlier, I got completely different results. I wanted to show you one specific example. Let's just look at this one here so you get an idea of how this stuff works. So here you can see they literally just start with a cube, and then they start intruding polygons, moving them around, and there are no rules, or of course there are a bunch of rules, but it's kind of like with painting. Just because you know the rules, it doesn't know that you can paint. And there are a bunch of people that don't know any rules, but they can just paint. They're just good at it. And when it comes to modeling, it's the same thing. It just takes a whole lot of practice and playing around with the tools that you have. And all of the stuff that you saw here is things that you already know. It's just, why? Sheesh, that is overkill. That is not necessary with a setup that they did there. Well, whatever. Everyone has like their preferences. So here just adding more and more polygons, more and more details. Also here for the arms, when we get there, you will also see just intruding something, extruding something, and then grabbing polygons on the sides, extruding those, and then we have the hand. So in the end, it's actually all very simple and all the same, but it all just comes down to being able to think about the shape that you want, think about how it looks like when it's smoothed, and yeah, changing the polygons. And this is something that just comes with practice. So do some scribbles, start with those. I wish I could just find, I should have it in my history because I just looked at it earlier. There we go. This is the one. Here, this, I guess it's a girl. She just started with illustrations of planning on how she wanted it to look, and she created an illustration from the front and from the side. These lines are there so that you know that your features are exactly on the same spots. So the hair ends on the same spot, the eyebrows are on the same spot. So this is what these guidelines are for. So you know that both views are synchronized with one another. And then in Cinema 4D, she just started placing her object on there and started modeling it. So for this one here, she actually kept it fairly simple, and she didn't use much manual modeling techniques. It's just, well, as you saw, a capsule. Then we have the eye. For the eyebrows, it's just a sweep. Then for the hair and for the body, she uses manual modeling. So here for the ear, a little bit, it's literally just a cube in a subdivision surface, made a little bit flatter. And for the hair, she actually did some interesting things. So here you can see how she creates cuts. So first, she creates cuts on the head there. Then she deletes part of the geometry that she doesn't need. And then she selects the bottom parts of the cuts that she doesn't need. Like that. There we go. And then she's just left with a part of the hair that she actually wanted. So she has a start, like we did with the rooftop, just in a little bit more complex, that she then can extrude out. Then to make it fit in the middle, she deletes the polygons that are on the inside. So it needs to be open for the symmetry to work. The polygons need to be open. So she deletes all the polygons on the inside. Then she selects the points, scales them down, puts them to the center, the same way that we always do. And then when it's placed into a symmetry, it works a lot better. And then she starts to add more polygons, more points, and merges things together so that the geometry can be smoothed out better. So there are specific arrangement of polygons that work better than others, but it's really hard to explain them. It's just about learning that. So here you can see how this looks when it's smoothed a lot better. So this works. Whereas in the beginning, when she started, this does not work because we have here this weird triangle shape and points that are way too close together, and it destroys this overall shape that we want. So having less points is always better when you want to create a smoother shape. And that is why she broke up the triangle and merged all these points together. Exactly. So these kind of speed modeling techniques are very interesting to look at because you can see how other people are playing around with their models and getting to it. By the way, what you see in here is an external render engine, which is called Arnold, but yeah, it looks very awesome. You can create very, very nice render setups with it very easily, as you can see here. So this looks very smooth, like it would look with Cinema 4D when we use the 2 times the secondary method for the GI. But this render engine costs more than Cinema 4D itself. Well, I think by now it's a little bit cheaper, but Cinema 4D is like, as a standalone back then, it was 1,600 or something. And by now they also switched to a subscription model. But yeah, all these things cost a lot of money. So this looks nice and it's very simple to get there with Arnold, but we ain't got the money to do that. So let's stick to the physical render of Cinema 4D. When it then comes to, oh my god, how much time does it need? I've been talking forever. Okay, I will pause the recording. I'll be back in a second so we can talk about the other examples, or maybe for this one I can already talk about it. So these ones here were probably planned beforehand a little bit, and this one here looks a little bit like manual modeling, just selecting rings of polygons. Ah, there we go. Apparently I need to bitch, so you work the way that I want to. Anyways, so probably manual modeling to select rings and move them to the sides. And for this one here, also to make the lines here work, what I think that they did is they built it once in kind of like a T pose, and they bend the arms down. So probably they started out with something like we have a sphere here, and then we have probably a capsule rotated around. So something like this. Then, of course, we would have a bunch more subdivisions, so it all looks nice and smooth. When we then apply a texture, let's just see if we can actually get to this, or at least something that looks fairly close. Let's just go in the color and try to add gradient that is like this. Probably something like that. Yeah, something like that. And let's drop this in here and apply this. It goes around like this. Yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. Perfect, this already works. Then we increase the tiles U. Okay, this almost worked. What? You don't want to? There we go. Okay. Zip. So we have something like this. Perfect. And then we want to bend it down. So we can use the bend deformer. The top is the one that does the bending. So we rotate it around, move it to the side, drop it into the capsule. Make sure that the capsule has enough subdivisions along the height segments. And then we can bend it. Make sure to keep the Y size. And then we can just add a second bend, which we then rotate around this way, 180 degrees, and move to the other side. There we go. So we would not model it in this direction already, so in this shape, but we would just change it to this shape later on. And because of the structure that it has, I think it might be using a displacement map. So let's do some more. Let's try 40. And let's see what happens when we apply this to a displacement. So again, I will be fairly lazy and use the physical sky. Don't use the physical sky for any final products unless you do real architectural things. But for anything else, using the sky, the physical sky, like you might think it looks cool, but everyone knows what the physical sky looks like, and they know that that is just cheap and cheating. Anyways, so let's take the gradient texture, copy it, and clear it, and let's put this into the displacement. Now a displacement pretends, or not pretends, it subdivides our geometry, and it then displaces it. So let's enable the subpolygon displacement, and let's hit Command R to render, and we should see how it now displaces this. And it adds actual geometry to this based on the black and white information. Now, the sphere doesn't do it because it's set to render perfect, and I think the height of 10 is too much, so let's try a height of 2. And render this. Still too much, but you start to see what this is doing. So with this gradient, we are creating actual geometry, and let me also enable the round geometry here. Better. And we have this nice, real three-dimensional pattern. However, displacements are subdividing our objects, meaning it adds a bunch more detail, a bunch more polygons, which also means that our render time will be a lot slower. So that is always something to keep in mind. Okay, what do we have next? Yeah, I think the rest in here should be fairly clear how to do. Here also I would design it in a straight way, so it's easier to create these wiggles on there by hand with a cloner, probably, and then you place everything into a null and then bend it with a bend deformer. Okay, next person. Okay, so we have this brainy thing. And I know that there are tutorials out there that explain exactly how this works. I forgot how it is called. And I will see if I can get it back into my mind. I've done it a couple of times, but because it's very specific and because there are so many tutorials out there for it, I just never use it for a project or for realsies. Still, I would start with a hemisphere. Then, this is a very complex thing. Then I would use an emitter. Was it an emitter? No, then they would be super far apart. Well, unless I make the emitter very small. I think it was an emitter. Let's just see. Let's do something tiny like this. A little bit like this. Then we would use little spheres, icosahedrons, very low resolution. We put it into the emitter and tell the emitter to create particles that are this object. So when I now play this back, it's essentially doing this. So these ones, I give the size of kind of like how thick I want this to be. So they're shooting out like this. Let's actually give this emitter a size of 1. So it's a pretty straight... Ooh. Oh, that's the birth rate. Sorry. That's not what I wanted to change. This is what I wanted to change. Or is there even a point? No. That's not common, but that's not what I want. Okay. Is there any variation? No. Okay. Let's just keep it this way. And then the trick is that we say, right click on here, go to simulation tags, then we say soft body, but on the soft body we say that it's not made out of polygons, but of clones. So it will use all the clones that we have, and why is it emitting it in such a weird way? It's odd. Frames. I feel like it's pushing out more clones that it's showing. That's kind of weird. On the sphere, I will then tell it to be simulation tags, collider body, and making sure that under collision it is. Probably automatic might work, but I will choose a static mesh. So it is falling in here. And you can see how it's kind of like creating this string of things, and they are all falling on top of each other. Yeah, even though it's not showing all of them at the same time the way that it should, but they are there. So let's make this a little bit longer. Oops. So it has a bunch of time to create these and fall on there. And we also need to make sure that the emitter is emitting for enough time. Maybe we try to tell this one here to be a little bit smoother. I think structural. Let's set this to 0 and see what happens. Yishke. 10. Yeah, so it is something like this. You can see how they are starting to fall on top of each other. But there was some other way that they were closer together. I just forgot it. I even think that they use cubes. But I'm just not 100% sure. Oh, the cubes are actually working better. Let's stick to the cubes. I'm not quite sure what my emitter is doing. It's doing some weird shit, but doesn't matter. So this is kind of what we want. We want them to lay on top of each other and not intersect so much. Because what we do next is we will use the tracer. And we tell the tracer to trace whatever the emitter does. And it should not trace the paths, but it just should connect all objects. Was it that one? So now let's hide this. Let's see. Wow. This one is completely not doing what it should. Connect all elements. Fucker. It should connect all these objects together. This is very weird. It should definitely work with a regular cloner. But I don't really want to use a regular cloner right now. I'm pretty sure that was done with the emitter. But why doesn't the tracer connect them? Damn it. But I want to show this now. Where is this? What option am I forgetting? As I said, I've done this like twice in my life. No, this is definitely not the option. Okay, I will pause this and try a few things. I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I know that it works with the cloner. I just tried it. So we do it slightly different. We create a cloner and we use these on the cloner itself. Should still be soft body made of clones, exactly. And then we tell the cloner to clone on an object, which is the emitter. So this way we don't have an emitter as our final output, but we have an actual cloner object. So we then have all these bunches of things that are falling on there. And then on the tracer, we can tell it to use the cloner. And in the cloner, in the options, we say connect all objects. And I played around with this too much. Immediate clones, no, nodes only. There we go. So then we can tell the cloner to are you fucking serious? Let's do it like this. But when I hide it, this should, there we go. There's something definitely not too right with the current version of Cinema. Anyways, we can then use a circle and a sweep on this. So this goes in here and this goes in here. And we make this one as thick as our clones were, like so. Then in the tracer, I would make this one cubic and uniform, and then we have all these nice things like this that are falling on top of each other and creating this funky end result. And then it's just about playing with how many clones are emitted and the settings of the soft body in here. Okay, I hope this explains this, and I'm so glad that I managed to kind of get this together. This stuff down here could be done with soft body, but too much simulation time. I don't want to waste my life on that stuff. And the rest should be pretty self-explanatory. These dots on there are also just a texture, I think. I think there's actually a pattern. Let's just go to the color, texture, and then which was it? Was it tiles? Oh yeah, it was tiles. And here's something. Was it random? Oh, that's one random thing. But they had one with circles, and one that was a little bit more random, like this one. Something even more random? Nope. Okay, so let's just try it. The circles, and make everything black except for these ones. It feels like it should be a little bit more random. Maybe they also use their own texture, but yeah, basically this on there, and then playing around with the tiles here to apply there. Yeah, this is definitely way too regular compared to this one. This looks like it's a texture that was prepared in Photoshop or something that just had a bunch of circles on there. And that was then used as a mask for another material. So if I want these circles to be another material, I would do it like this. So this is then my mask that I would use. So let me just copy these tiles. In the reflectance channel, I would then use my GGX, and here conductor, and let's use gold. Oops. And then we will go to the alpha channel and paste in this texture. So now we can see we have these dots, and then we just need another color as the base material, which is applied first, and then we have these golden dots on top of that. Okay, I hope this makes sense. Next one. So, these materials kind of look like, I think we saw something like this in the Cinema 4D library. This is pretty much the dot pattern that I just showed you, but applied to with a displacement map, displacement channel. And the background, I would believe, is actually just an image and not built in Cinema 4D. And to stack these on top, it was something similar to this. So we would have this one rotated around. And we have one capsule like this. Let's say that this is good enough. A little bit longer. Then another one. No, I should really have this in the right position. Like this. And then another one. And let's just stick to these two. It should be good enough. Okay, so the torus needs to be a collider. So we go to simulation tags, collider body, and these two are soft bodies. And with soft bodies, it's very important to have an even grid, and the resolution of the grid defines how fast your soft body can calculate. So the higher the resolution, the slower, but the higher the resolution, the softer it becomes, and the more details we can get into it. So in the capsule, in the objects, let's just add a couple of more height segments so it's a little bit more regular. And when I now play this back, they are falling down and on top of each other. So right now they are falling down too much and they are gliding too much. So on all of them under collision, I would increase the friction to 100. So they should now just lay on top and not fall down as quickly. And I want them to be a lot more structural. So let's select the soft bodies. And I haven't played around with them in a while because it is just too annoying. Let's try, was it flexion? Oh, no, that is the opposite of what I wanted. This actually looks already a little bit better. Can I get this higher? No, that doesn't make a difference. Let's try here. Nope. Nope. I don't really see the changes that I want to see. Which is the magic setting? Oosh! That was not good. That may be stiffness. Perfect. That was the one. There we go. So maybe just 10. So it does fall down a little bit. Yeah. And if we then have a higher resolution, so maybe 16, 8, 32. Then we can already see it takes a lot longer to calculate, but it also gives us a more realistic end result here. Anyways, so soft bodies is something to play around with. So no one looks at this and says, oh, I know exactly which settings to take. They are literally just always, they are just too many settings and people are just randomly changing settings until it looks the way that it should. This is something to keep in mind in general. So when building stuff in 3D, you oftentimes don't end up exactly the way that you planned it to, because you're just doing something, you're trying something, certain things don't work out, but then you accidentally changed something and it created something super cool. And then you're like, awesome, let's go with that. So it's all very creative and about exploring and not being afraid to just try out different things. This one here I'll get into a little bit later because I saw that in another example as well, and there it was even animated. Okay, next example is this one here. So here was the question, how to model this. And I think it basically should be fairly clear. We just have manual modeling here on these edges, getting the basic shape done. For the piano part, I would just use cloners. For these ones here, we could actually use also a cloner and just use null objects in between to kind of like teach it that it should always be 1, 2, 3, empty, 1, 2, empty. 1, 2, 3, empty, 1, 2, empty. Just to show you how that would work. Let's say these are our white keys. Then we put them into a cloner, and I would make it linear because it's a little bit easier to understand. So here, these are the white keys, and I have no idea how many we need. So I just make a bunch. Then I would duplicate it, and for the black keys, I know that they are half offset. They follow the same pattern, but they need to be a little bit thinner, of course. And then we have 1, 2, 3, empty, 1, 2, empty. So 1, 2, 3, empty. 1, 2, empty. And now we have this pattern. 1, 2, 3, empty, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, empty, 1, 2. And then we just define how many of these we need. Ta-da! Okay, so this is these. Then for these ones, it's just placing these circles on there. And here I want to show you a technique that can be very useful. So let's say I will do it on a cube just to keep things a little bit simpler. No, I will not do it on a cube. Let's actually do it for real. So we have this awesome shape. Let's actually do it for real. So like this. And we are creating a couple of cylinders. I'm sure that there's somewhere a way to calculate exactly how it should be rotated. And I know that I knew the way, but I don't anymore. There's some way where I can kind of like know what rotation this is. But I've gotten older and I care less. So I will just do it by hand until it kind of matches on there. And if it looks good, then it's close enough. I'm not doing product design here. So I could place a couple of these here, and I obviously want some illustration rings around it, right? So I have a bunch of elements here, and I have some illustrations that should go along with it. And I don't want to place them in Cinema 4D all separately with projections. So here's what we can do. We will first go into the UV layout. So this is a little bit crazy. So body paint UV edit of our cube. Then we need to tell the cube that it should oh my god, they've changed this layout a lot. Oh my god, I hope I can find the things. Okay, so they have the new thing down here. Okay. I can do this. Leonard, I trust in you. So let's try automatic UVs and hit apply. Seriously, it's just a fucking cube. And this is what you give me? Oh, I only had one thing selected. Let's select all of them and try it again. Apply. Okay, much better. But of course, first I had to bitch, you know? So, am I happy with this? Not really. This looks nothing like I wanted to. Let's try angled. Select everything and apply. This looks already a little bit better. That is the back side. This is the front. This looks a little bit better. I think I will go with this one. So essentially it unwraps, I didn't want to touch it. It unwraps the polygons that we have, and it yeah, places them in a two-dimensional space. Now that we have this, what we can create is something that I will also mention a little bit later when we do this Spark AR thing. I could create a very simple setup, something like this, and I will render it with, let's just keep this on, and let's render this additionally with ambient occlusion, and let's just add a sky. So we have a very simple light setup like this. Now that we've created the UVs, we can bake them into a texture. So I will right click on it, and I will go to Bake Material. I will tell it where it should be baked to. So let's call this one Cube. As a PSD, 8-bit, that's fine. A lot larger. Let's do something like 2000. Probably it needs to be a little bit larger than that. Then we can click on Preview to we also need to give this. Let's go back to our standard. Just a default material. There we go. Then we can click Preview, and you can see how it's calculating the different sides of the polygon and what they should look like. And when we now click on Bake, it will render the actual thing. Baking complete 0 minutes? Are you fucking kidding me? Okay. There we go. Okay. So apparently we had to turn on the surface color, and now we can see how it's rendering through the material and it's baking in the color that it has, which is pretty cool. So later on, when I talk about Spark AR in a very little bit, this is what we can do to kind of like bake specific effects already into our object. So now, just so that you see it, we can go to the color channel, or actually to the luminance channel, and apply our cube surface color. And in the viewport, make sure that this is set to no scaling. And now you can see how this light is applied to it. Let's turn off the reflectance. And you can see how the light, like it's brighter here in the top, is applied to it, and our ambient occlusion is baked into the object. So that is pretty cool. But the main reason why I did this is, we can now go and open up the cube color, and because of the ambient occlusion, we can clearly see where these elements are. And we can then create our own texture based on that. So here, it's a little bit stretched, but I guess it's okay. So we can then create our own elements on here. Blind here. Let's just do it this way. I hate this new Photoshop behavior. Okay. So, and then we just place these wherever. You get the idea. And I make sure that I have a clean background, so something like this. And this is now what I can save. Save. Going back to Cinema 4D, and I reload the texture. And I re-render the texture. And now we can see how, based on the elements that we've created, we have now a layout that we are printing on our object. All right. And that should now make pretty clear, I hope, how this stuff can be rebuilt in Cinema 4D. Good. Now let's go to the links that I've gotten. So there's this trend of people taking illustrations from children and making 3D art out of it, or more fancy illustrations. And I love these kinds of things. So I love these references. The specific part that was asked here is how to create textures kind of like this. And there are different ways of doing it. I think in this case, it is not a texture, because I wouldn't know how to create a texture like this as a texture. So I think this is actual geometry. And I will show you how I would attempt to do it. I would start, and let's see how well I can get there. I will do it, however, in a much simpler way, just to not kill my machine. So I would start with a capsule, and I could either do it with the clones, but I think with hair I have a little bit more control. I will try it with clones. I know how to do the next steps. With hair I only know how to do the first steps, and I'm not quite sure. Well, I could still do it with a cloner then. We'll just see. We'll see. I'll just try something. So I will try it with hair. So I will go to simulate hair objects, and I add hair to this object. So by default it just adds a bunch of hair here. I know that this can be a lot shorter, so let's try something like 20 or so. And let's also add a couple of more guides so I can see a little bit better what's happening. To do this, I switch my mode here to polygon area, because now I can just add guides wherever I want to, or how many I want to. I need to, however, go to editing and say reroute and regrow in order to have them applied randomly on here again. Now, with this, I can go into what do I want? Simulate hair, then hair tools. And I can use the brush tool in order to kind of like move all the hairs here down. These should kind of like go up and to the back. So it's, you know, something like this. Okay. Next, I want to see if I can use the hairs as a reference for my cloner, and if it detects the direction that they are growing in. I have not tried this yet, so I'll just see. It might not work. I will also save this, because my cinema might die. Let's call this one Harry. Then, I want to use capsules, but much smaller ones. I know that in Blender this works better, but let's see how well it works here. But if they would have done this in Blender, I don't know how they merged these geometries together, because Blender as of now doesn't have an option for this. So I don't know. Let's see. So in the cloner, let's see if we can use as an object the hair object. Surface, edge, no, it doesn't detect the hair object. Maybe I have to tell the hair that it creates type spline. Well, it is something. So in the cloner, let's set this to 1. And definitely change the instance. Oh no, it has to be an instance for later. Come on, finish thinking. Holy fucking shit, this is way too many hairs. Let's disable this. And let's go to, it's many, many hairs that it's creating. We don't need this many. That's what I said about cinema can die with stuff like this. So I have created a specific amount of guides, but the guides are just there so I have a low resolution where I can style where stuff should go. And then Cinema creates a bunch of hairs in between and matches everything together. Yeah, it's dying. Let's just force quit this and start this again. Yeah, but I think this actually might work. So let's go back. So this one doesn't do anything. Here under generate, first I will say that it should create, let's say, 500 hairs. And then generate spline. It's thinking. Is it done? Oh, probably because I have more guides than hairs. How many guides do I have? 6. Oh yeah, I don't see anything. That's good. That's good. Okay, I can live with that. So we take the capsule, make it smaller, put it into the cloner, and we tell the cloner to use an object, and the object should be our hair object. And it should create 1. Okay. 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 Small rotation. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Plus X. Mm-hmm. Plus Z. Mm-hmm. I think this worked. This is cool. So let's see if we can create more hairs. So under generate hairs, let's try maybe 1000. We might need to update the cloner. There we go. There we go. And how interactively can we still style this? I save this. Designer, save stuff before you do things like that. So tools, and we now take the brush. This is kind of cool. Cute, cute, cute. This is so fun. Okay, so now we've designed kind of where these should go. Then we want to give them different sizes. We could already start by giving using different capsules. So maybe one capsule is a little bit longer than the other, just to already have a little bit of a variation in here. And then on top of that, I will use a random effector, but I'm not changing the position, just the scale that we have. Like this, and probably they need to be overall a little bit smaller. But they should be, we should have enough and large enough ones so that they are overlapping like this. Okay, nice. This seems to be working. Good. Okay, next, I want them to kind of blend into one another so it looks like it's one geometry. So, you guessed it, we will use the volume builder. Save. I drop it into the volume builder and let's see what it's doing. It's doing something. Let's try 1. And this already could be done. We add a little bit of a smooth. Oh, let's try 0.5. Are you done thinking? I don't see a difference. I wish the volume builder was more reliable. I feel like in the last version in R21 it was working much better. See, now it pretends that it's updated, but it doesn't show me any updates and it doesn't let me navigate anymore. Yishka. At this point, I could already mention what my thoughts are for the next quarter, because I do feel like that cinema is not doing as well as it should anymore. Still, it has some strength where it does certain things a lot better than other applications, but there are also a bunch of things that I slowly find very annoying and disappointing. So yeah, this is... it's calculating something, but it just doesn't show it. So what I'm thinking for next quarter is just not showing it at all. You fucker. Okay, then whatever. I keep it at 1 centimeter. That was working. And just keep this. So my thoughts are that we switch to Blender. I haven't done that much with Blender yet, but the few tests that I've done are actually pretty awesome. And teaching Blender instead of Cinema 4D would not be such a big difference because the basic principles are the same. I just need to learn the different interface, and then the rest is the same. So I'm thinking about doing the advanced course, not by doing advanced Cinema 4D techniques, but by doing a different 3D application. I will talk about it a little bit more in depth next session or during the break. I will have kind of like a poll where I show you kind of like, this is what Cinema does and this is what Cinema is good at. And then I will show you in comparison what Blender does and what it is good at. And then I will let you decide. If you say, oosh, no, that sounds too hard to learn an entirely new program again. Or if you're like, oh my God, why didn't we just start with this already? I will give you more details then. But for now, let's stick to this. And here we can see how we've created this nice structure. And I hope that this is close enough to this that you understand how we got there. Then, when it comes to these patterns here, also just cloners, the teeth, cloners, this stuff here, probably sculpting, which we've done last class, so you know how that works. Let's take a look at the other examples. There were a lot of overlaps. This one is literally just manual modeling and a little bit of sculpting here. The texturing is fairly hard to do. You could look at tutorials on how to use the body paint module in Cinema 4D, but yeah, that is also one of the reasons I want to switch from Cinema to another application, to Blender, because Cinema is just not good at this stuff. So when you see things like this where you have like textures that don't feel like something that you could just project on, but it feels like we have seamless patterns all over and smooth gradients and stuff that interacts with wrinkles and such. These are painted on top of the object, and there are applications that can do it better. The most popular ones are Substance Painter and Mari. Blender also does a fairly good job at it, and Cinema does a very bad job at it. So the texture here was probably not created in Cinema 4D. The rest could be, but the texture with these gradients here, unlikely that it's Cinema. Next one. Here, well, we talked about Sketch and Toon. These structures here that you see are actually just projected on there, or not even projected. They could just be added in Photoshop later on. And the rest, because the geometry is very, very simple, I think should be fairly self-explanatory. Here, also, I'm not quite sure if I have something to talk about that I didn't talk about already. These dots that we have on here, also something that's usually painted on top, but again, Cinema is not like the best application to do stuff like that. Here we have depth of field again, and cloner, stuff that we talked about. As I said, so in the beginning you were probably like, oh my gosh, everything takes so long. How can you talk about so many different examples? I can, because so many things are kind of like repeating themselves. What else? Here also probably a bunch of manual modeling things and just moving stuff around. There's one thing that I can show you that is kind of interesting, how you can create a low poly version of pretty much anything. So let's start with, I don't know. Let's just do it with a sphere. So let's start with a sphere. Let's give it a bunch of segments. Not too many. That's good. And then we will use a polygon reduction and drop the sphere into it. And now you can see how it creates this randomized, smoother pattern over here. And here we can just increase this even further and get rid of the font tag. And now we have a low poly version of a sphere. And this works with pretty much anything. So I could also say I have a cone, and this cone, I will give it a couple of more segments. So a couple of more height segments, a couple of more round segments. There are no cap segments, there are cap segments. Here. And we drop this into the low poly and the polygon reduction thing. And it does its thing. Here, however, we realize it gives us a very regular end result, which sucks. So we introduce some randomness ourselves. We could do it actually with the random effector, because the random effector can be applied like a deformer as well, by simply dropping it in here and telling it that it is a deformer that should affect the points. And now it affects the points the same way it usually would affect clones, which is pretty awesome. So here we just give it a very, very subtle randomness so that the polygon reduction has something more interesting to reduce. And then we get rid of this one here, and we have, ta-da! A low poly random cone shape. Isn't this cool? Low poly everything. Just make sure you have a good high resolution to start with. If the polygon reduction doesn't work the way that you want it to, just add a random deformer so that it has some randomness to do a random grid on there, and then you're good. Okay. Although these trees are built a little bit differently, it does look like manual modeling of just moving stuff around a little bit. But the floor that we have here could be done like that. Just to show you real quick, there's something that is called a landscape, which is used very often in Cinema 4D. So here we could say that it should be not borders at sea level, so something like this. And I could put this one into the polygon reduction. And just like before, increase this a little bit further. And get rid of this. And then we have a nice low poly random landscape. Awesome! Okay, next one. Here, also I think we've already talked about most of the parts. For this one here, a little tip. What we could do is we could start building a house, kind of. And if we want to give it a little bit more of an interesting shape, we could put an FFD deformer on it. So put it inside here. Fit to parent, I usually give it a little bit more height so I can see where stuff is. And then we can move some points around. Okay, let's make this overall a little bit larger. Just so that we can create a little bit more of a custom shape. So something like this. Then we can use our cloner with cubes that are then the tiles on there. So this will be one tile. Then we use the cloner, drop this inside. Then we tell the cloner to clone on top of an object, which is our plane. And we tell it to clone across the polygon centers. Now I realized that I probably should have scaled the cube differently. Like this. And we can define how many of these clones we want by increasing the amount of segments that we have here. So here, maybe 15 by 15. Looks about right. Then really? Does it? Are you updating? It didn't update. Then I make the clones a little bit larger. Then I already know that they should all be rotated in one direction at least a little bit so that they are lying on top of each other a little bit better. So in the cloner, I go to transform and I play around with the rotations. Not this one, but this one, just so that they are just already lying on top of each other like this. And then I just give them a little bit randomness. So cloner. My finger's on there. Damn. For the position, I just change it ever so slightly. I don't need to see the plane anymore. And I add a little bit of rotation to it. So, rotation. like this. Maybe I can make the cubes a little bit larger now. And then we have a nice little thing like this one. Okay, let's go to the next one. I think this was already the last one. Yeah, it was. Okay, let's go to the next one. This one here, super simple. There's actually a tool that can create these super rounded things in Cinema 4D. I have not used it yet. I don't even know. I think it's this one here, the spline arc tool. Let's try it. Okay, so I click and drag. Ooh, but how can I make it? I mean, that's okay. But what if I wanted exactly 90 degrees? Well, okay, I'll just eyeball it. No, I'm not done. Jeez, I'm sure there's a better way than what I'm doing here. Okay, so this is a cool tool. I just don't know how to use it yet. Anyways, fuck it. Yeah, let's say that this is it. I don't know what I'm doing. Then we put this into the extrude. Why did my light get so dark? I put it into the extrude, so I have something like this. And then I just need to create a texture in Photoshop first that I can use. So let's start with, this could work. Let's just rotate this around a little bit. And then I have some text that I designed in here, super fancy. And I'll make my background color black. And I stretch this like a mad person. Something like this, and I save this text, and I will go to Cinema 4D, and I will create a new material. I will make this one luminance white, and I go into the alpha channel. Actually, this one, no, it's not luminance. Sorry, doesn't matter. This definitely goes into the alpha channel. Then we have the color, and we apply it to here. Damn it! It's rotated the wrong way around. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Image rotation. Chip. Save. Let's reload the image here and re-render the material, and there we go. There we have it. And then the light setup is actually fairly simple. Just a single infinite light, fairly soft shadow, so area shadow, 10 degrees, something like this, and a little bit of a sky, but not too much. So maybe just 33%. So we have a nice contrast, and we want the background to be black. So we tell the sky under compositing to not be seen by the camera. So when we now render this, ta-da! We have our effect here. Apparently my resolution needs to be a little bit higher, but you get the point how this works, I hope. Okay, so that is how this was made. Then we have this one. So let's see how well I get this. But essentially, it's just two texts. I have not read what they say. It was too hard for me. As I go to Mo Text, you can find it here, or you can also find it in here. And this will be first I need something really bold. Do you have something bold? Let's see how that goes. First, and rotating this around. Second. Something like this. Then we need to create this shape, which I think is literally just a circle. Then these two belong together, so they go into a null object. Then we use the spline wrap. You can see how we have a lot of things that are repeating. The arrow points in the right direction, which is good. And we apply this to the circle. This seems to be working quite well. Okay, let's adjust the size here until I feel like it matches kind of to my text. And in the spline wrap, lastly, I will go to the rotation. And where was it? I think I just need to pull, was it this one? Yeah, pull this up. Either to 1 or to 0.5. I think 0.5 works already. To get more details, you can open this up, and with this point selected, I can move it to exactly 0.5. And I think this works. Yeah. And then we just animate the offset here, or I think they usually animate the offset together with the banking. Yeah. So if we were to animate it, we would start the offset here, and then 100 frames later, it needs to be one way around. So 100. Makes sense. And while it's doing that, it needs to be rotated around by 360. And then we have this zoop going around and twisting at the same time. Oh my god. Am I good or am I good? I am good. It's already late. It doesn't matter. Next one. This one I will not go into any details. We're pretty much done. Because all of these are a heck of a lot of work with manual modeling. So all the things I've talked about, and here I can just say, watch these speed modeling tutorials to get inspired of how to do certain shapes, and just, it's a lot about trial and error. You really have to think of this like learning how to draw. The first drawings that you do will probably look a little bit awful, and it's the same with the 3D models, because it is just about practice. And there are certain things that you can't just learn by looking at things. Your muscles need to learn, your eyes need to learn how to look at things in a certain way. So just start modeling things and start failing at things and just continue doing that. And in a couple of months, you can look back at the first models you did and you can be like, oh my god, how could I have ever created something like this? And the more models you create, the better you will get at it. And the more you understand how you need to set your polygons, how they can smooth, what works and what doesn't. The last thing is Spark AR. I personally have not worked with Spark AR because I guess I'm too old for that shit. But essentially, you can create things in Cinema 4D and import them there. So I'm not quite sure exactly what image format they need. Probably an OBJ or an FBX. And these ones can be just this. So we could take this one and say, I want this awesome thing in my Spark AR application. If they only support OBJs, you can only export a single image. So a single frame. And that would be by going to File, Export, and then say OBJ, waveform. Not waveform. File, Export, wavefront. Waveform is a wave audio file. They do have a couple of presets. I would just stick with what it does, so the 3ds should be fine. And we hit OK. And this one, let's just keep it on title object. And the nice thing is, in the newer versions of Mac, you can even take a look at the file here by selecting it and then hitting the spacebar, and then you can look at your file here. Oh my god! Isn't that cool? And this is then a file that you could combine with Spark AR. The materials that you add, however, will not be exported, so usually in Spark you need to give it your own materials. However, if you create materials that you bake, it would work. In order to bake it, however, I need to have, well, it could work. I think they have out of the box already UVs. Let's just see. So let's say I have a color, and maybe I use, where was it? Not the the tiles, not the checkerboard. The tiles. I use some funky planks. No, not rings. Where are these dots? Circles. I use these circles, so let's just say I have blue dots and orange dots. Very pretty. And I apply this here, and I set this to cubic, just so I have dots kind of like all over the place. And maybe I give this a white color in between. Yeah, this looks awful. And then I can already add a little bit of light to this, but I wouldn't do too much. No, actually, let's let the light, leave the light out of it mostly. But I do want to add a little bit of ambient occlusion to intensify my shadows. And with my sky, I just want to give this overall a little bit light. Let's actually try to use full-on sky. So pure white color. Here we go. Okay, and now these shadows that we have on this object and the texture, we should be able to bake it onto our object. So let's see how that would work. First, I would try to say current state to object. This is giving me too much bullshit. So I will use the connect, drop everything in here, apply the material to there. That looks awesome. This one, current state to object, and I don't really need this anymore. I just have this. I don't need these. I do need that one. Then on here, we will right click and go to, where was it? Do you remember? Material text, bake texture. There we go. Let's tell where it should go to. So dots. And this one, probably this is not high enough for a resolution for this much geometry, but also I think that Spark AR probably has a high, or has like a value of how large a texture is supposed to be or can be. Yeah, so let's try this. If you have issues with weird edges, you can also try increasing the pixel border to something like 5 and see if that works better. And super sampling can also work, but it will make your renders a lot slower. So I would be careful with that. Then in the options, let's see if we have different things for illumination and surface color, but I think surface color should cover everything. Yeah, it looks weird, but it might work. I'm not sure. Let's take a look at the UVs, if they are messed up. Oh yeah, they are totally messed up. No, but I think it can work. No, it will not work. We need to clean them up. Let's try cubic, hit apply. No? You don't like that? Do you? This will not work. Okay. Then let's switch to, where did it go? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Then let's select all the polygons here. Now, where's the other tool? In order to select these polygons, you usually need to be in a very specific tool. But none of them work. It's very disappointing. Oh, it did work! Fucker! I had to have this selected. Damn it. Okay. Yeah, but this looks fine. This looks fine. Why did it work but not show it? That should not be the case. Anyways, okay, but this is something that we can work with. Perfect. So let's go here, do the preview again. And let's see what it looks like when we bake it. And I will get back to you when it's done. Okay, it's done. I think it shows black and white because we also have illumination enabled. But our end result might look better. Let's see. What did I call it? Dots. D. Dots. Illumination. That is what we saw there. And surface color. That's a different one. Yay! This worked. Perfect. So, now we could go in here. Let's switch back to our standard layout. Create a new material. Luminance channel. And we put in our dot surface color. For the viewport, just for us, let's set it to no scaling and apply this to our object. And now you can see how we have all of this niceness baked into our object. And this, with all this niceness and shadows baked in, is now something that we can add to your application. Now, when we export this, we don't want to have all of this shit in there. So what we want to do is select it, copy, create a new scene, and paste this in here. And this is now what we export. So File, Export, and we can export it as a wavefront OBJ. You probably always need to tell the material separately to be uploaded. Another file that is very popular is Alembic or Collada and FBX. So these are kind of like the most interesting ones. Waveform, Collada, Alembic, FBX. And an FBX can actually contain the texture. Let's see. And it could also contain animation. But the animation, of course, would not work because then objects are kind of like differently to one another and our shadows wouldn't make much sense anymore. Ooh, it even has a bake materials option. That's new. I've never tried this. But embed textures, that is what we are interested in. Let's just keep it untitled 8, save, and let's see how well the preview is. Ah, it doesn't show the preview anymore. What about preview? Oh, I thought it did, but Collada works. But I'm not sure which of the two. Let's try the new one. But does it support my texture? I would love to have something that Cinema previews. Oh, that one doesn't work anymore either. This one works. And we have our stuff. Well, it works for the most part in here. But well, the Finder's not a 3D application. It's nice that it shows at least something, especially for OBJs. It's very useful, even though OBJs don't show materials in here. Okay. So this was a long session. We had so many things to talk about. I hope I didn't forget anyone. If I forgot someone, then I'm really sorry. You can be mad at me. Just send me an email and then I will record something specially for you. Okay. I hope you managed to get through everything. I hope this helped. And yeah, let's now quickly also talk about the face-to-face assignment, because we only have, this is session 8, so we only have one more session, and after that it's already the face-to-face. What? For the face-to-face, what I want you to do is create a model. It could be just a single model with a very simple surrounding, like an infinite floor, or you can create an entire scene, like a room or something where you place stuff in. And I want you to use as a concept, I hope this is not too controversial, but I want you to use climate change as your inspiration. So how you want to portray this is completely up to you. I just want you to build something for the topic climate change. Are you doing something that is for it or against it, or is it a concept for changing or fixing the climate, or just something to bring awareness? Everything is completely up to you. I'm not judging the concept. What I will judge in the end is just how you execute it. So I want you to use all of the skills that we've learned in our session so far. I want you to model characters of your fancy, or just create different objects using all the techniques that we have. There are a couple of lists of things that I don't want to see, like I don't want to see a horizon line, because that's always cheap. So make sure that either use an infinite floor or an angle where we don't see the horizon line, or, well, you have objects in the background where we don't see stuff like that. I also don't want to see lights that don't have shadows. I hope you also realize that. So sometimes in the homeworks people forget it from time to time, but always make sure when you use a light to also use a shadow. And either commit to a low poly style or commit to a smooth style. Which means if you, for instance, use something like a cylinder and you're close to it, I do not want to see these edges. So if you go for a low poly style, delete the Fong tag, do it like this, then I'm fine with it. But if you use polygon smoothing, it's polygon smoothing, then make sure that your cylinder has enough segments so that it looks nice and smooth and round. Okay, so these are the things. Don't want to see no transparency or horizon line. Don't want to see lights without shadows. And I don't want to see weird edges. And that's pretty much all the mistakes that you could do. And the concept of your piece of art should be something fitting to the concept of climate change. Preferably, render this at the resolution that we always use, so 1920 by 1080. If you feel fancy, you can also switch the sampling quality for your final render to medium. It will take quite a lot longer, but it will look slightly nicer. Because of the denoiser, we don't really see noise anyways, even at the low sampling quality, but we might see smudgy artifacts. So to get a better result, switch the sampling quality for the final render at medium. But what I usually do is I render it once at low resolution, just so that I have that and I know how long it takes, and then I let the medium version run afterwards, quite knowingly that I might cancel this because it takes too long and I don't want to wait that long. Okay. If you have questions for the face-to-face in general, how you should present it, or technical aspects of it, feel free to ask me. Also, if you already have ideas, send them to me, send me scribbles or references where you're like, I would like to use this or build this. How could I do that? Also send me things. So the face-to-face end result needs to be not something that surprises me. I can be helping you out in building this. So for me, the most important part is that for the end result for the face-to-face, we have something that is polished and looks nice and finished all the way through. And I will help you to reach that point. So if you have issues somewhere, write me an email, write me a WhatsApp message, and I will help you out with it. Okay. I think that was it. So this was a very, very long session. I hope you took your time watching it. I don't think I could watch through. I mean, I recorded it in one session, but I don't think I could listen to myself for so long. So, yeah. I hope you learned a lot today. I hope you learned a lot with cinema. But we have still one more session where I show you a couple of nice things. So have a nice week. There's no homework. What I want you to do is already think about and maybe already start with your face-to-face assignment, because you will not be able to do it overnight. It would be crazy. I mean, let alone the render time. It can take 5 hours to render your image. So don't do it on the last day. It will be killer. So have a nice week. Good luck with your face-to-face assignment. And talk to you soon. Bye. What happened to my voice there? Bye.